Joining us now, White House National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby. Admiral, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Good to be with you, Shannon.
Okay, so that speech that Chuck Schumer gave on Thursday, he lumped Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in with Hamas as one of the obstacles to peace. He called for new elections there. He said people within the government who oppose a Palestinian state are bigots. And I can only assume he means not only the Prime Minister, but Benny Gantz and others as well. Then our president said this about the speech.
To our friends in the international community, I say, is your memory so short, so quickly you forgot about October 7th, the worst massacre committed against Jews since the Holocaust? So quickly you are ready to deny Israel's right to defend itself against the monsters of Hamas?
Clearly not our president. But what our president said is he thought that it was a good speech and that he spoke for a lot of people. That is Prime Minister Netanyahu's reaction this morning saying, have you already forgotten? Does the president think that Benjamin Netanyahu is a bigot, that he's an impediment to peace, that he should be lumped in with Hamas?
Oh, these are two leaders that have known each other a long time, Shannon, and they don't agree on everything, haven't over 40 years. And there are certain aspects to the prosecution of operations in Gaza where we obviously don't agree with everything that Israel has done. But they have a relationship where they can talk to one another, and they do, and they will again. He is the Prime Minister of Israel. We respect the sovereignty of the Israeli people.
But does the president who called that speech a good speech agree there need to be new elections, that he shouldn't be the Prime Minister?
The president believes it's up to the Israeli people and the Israeli government to determine if and when there's going to be new elections. But he does, as he said shortly after Leader Schumer's very passionate speech. He recognizes that the leader was speaking for a lot of Americans who feel the same way about the way the war is going. We also have concerns about some of the operations and how they're being conducted. We need to make sure that civilians are protected and secured, that civilian casualties come down, that more trucks and assistance get in. And of course, we're still working on that temporary ceasefire to get all those hostages out.
Okay, so the president also said this week that there would be a red line he would consider Israel crossing if they went ahead with this invasion into Rafah, which they say they're going to do. I know there's been some quantifying of that, saying if there is an escape route for civilians, that's part of the issue. But if you consider that Israel is crossing a red line, what does that then mean? Do we pull aid? Do we pull weapons?
Yeah.
What does the president mean on the other side of that red line?
I don't want to get ahead of where we are right now or engage in hypotheticals, Shannon.
But he did say that.
But absolutely he did. And what he's talking about is what we've been saying now for a while. We understand the need to go after Hamas. We understand that there are Hamas brigades in Rafah and certainly represent a viable threat to Israel and to the Israeli people. But what we've said is we will not support, cannot support an operation in Rafah that doesn't have an executable, verifiable, achievable plan to take care of the 1.5 million people that are trying to find refuge in Rafah. People, by the way, that were pushed into Rafah from Khan Yunis a few weeks ago and even further north from in Gaza City when the operations were there. They have to be accounted for. Now the Israelis will tell you that they've got a plan for that, the evacuation, they call it humanitarian islands, and we welcome any credible plan to take care of them, but we haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen it yet.
Do you expect to get one before the offensive starts?
We would certainly welcome the opportunity to get a look at what their plans are before they move into Rafah, and I think it's important for your viewers to understand they have not done that yet. They have not moved into Rafah.
Right, correct. Okay, they say it could take a matter of weeks, that it could commence sooner rather than later. That's coming from the Prime Minister this morning. There's also this issue of the pier that we're trying to build in Gaza to get aid in. Pentagon says about 1,000 U.S. troops could be involved with that. The question is, as we've said, no U.S. troops will go into Gaza. That's mighty close. And so there are questions about their safety and also what happens to the aid once it gets unloaded. Here's Senator Marco Rubio worried about that.
The only people on the ground with any organization to distribute things are Hamas. So in essence, can they guarantee that we're going to go through all this trouble, put American lives on the line, just so aid can be distributed to Hamas, who in turn will then control it like they've controlled everything?
So what are the guarantees that the U.S. troops don't get involved and that Hamas doesn't take everything that unloads off that pier?
Well, in all fairness and with respect to the senator, Hamas isn't the only group distributing aid. There are many aid organizations on the ground that are helping with the distribution of food, water, medicine.
But fair to say they get their hands on things.
We have been watching this very closely, and we haven't seen evidence that Hamas has pilfered off a lot of the humanitarian assistance in a nefarious way. Nobody's making excuses for them, or what they've done to Gaza and the Gazan people, and how they put the Gazan people at risk, or how they certainly put the Israeli people at risk. Not at all, but there are other organizations that are doing that. I would tell you, we're still working out the details of exactly how the pier is going to operate, the modalities of it, and how the assistance is going to get from the temporary pier, this offshore pier, to the beach. Obviously, we're still going to need ground transportation, and we're working our way through that right now.
I want to get to another hot spot internationally. The U.S. signed on to a warning to Iran this week about ballistic missiles and armaments flowing from Iran into Russia in its efforts against Ukraine. As we get word this morning that Russians say that they've taken another key area in Ukraine, a small area in the Zaporizhia region. So it's a difficult stalemate at best there. Now Iran playing into this. Talk of more sanctions there, but there are a couple of authors with a new book out talking about how sanctions actually work in Iran. They say that rather than hurting the Iranian regime leaders, sanctions have strengthened the Iranian state and military and ended up hurting the exact people they're supposed to be helping.
We are working really hard to make sure that the sanctions don't hurt the Iranian people. One of the things that we talked about earlier this week was yet another an update or a renewal of the sanctions relief package that allows Iraq, for instance, to get electricity from Iran, because the Iraqi people are still dependent on Iran for
and
energy.
Plenty of critics of that, but we won't go down that rabbit trail.
I understand that, but the point I'm trying to make is that sanctions relief doesn't go to the mullahs, it doesn't go to the regime, it does go to the Iranian people. So we are working hard to make sure that as we employ economic measures against the regime, that we're not punishing the Iranian people. We don't have a beef with the Iranian people. It is with the IRGC, it is with the supreme leader, it's with the mullahs who continue to fund and support and resource terrorist groups throughout the region.
So to give a little bit more information, a Russian Defense Ministry is claiming that they have captured the village of Myrn in the Zaporizhia region.
Yeah.
This follows news just weeks ago of another area that was reclaimed by
Avdiivka.
Russia.
Yeah.
So where are we?
So, you called it a stalemate a little bit ago, and I think I'd push back a little bit on that. What we're seeing the Russians do, they got Avdiivka and the Donbass, and most of their effort has been in the east, the Donbass area. Now, you talked about this town in Zaporizhia, which is clearly more to the south. But they are pushing west from Avdiivka. The Ukrainians have about 3 lines of defense. The Russians are pushing up against that first one and trying to get to that second one. They're taking small towns and villages and farmland, not so much because it's strategically valuable, but because they want to show wins. Particularly now with the election this weekend, they want to show that they're on the move. But they are physically on the move, slowly, but they are. Because the Ukrainians don't have the artillery ammunition and the other capabilities they need to push back on the Russians and to take that ground back. That's why it's so critical, Shannon, that we get this supplemental funding. The Ukrainian commanders on the battlefield are literally making life and death decisions about whether they will fire back or won't, whether they'll move back, because they're running out of ammunition. Not courage, not leadership, not skill. They're running out of ammunition.
So we're going to talk to Congressman McCall up next about that and about what's potentially coming out of the House. But just very quickly, would the White House sign off on standalone measures? Say, just aid for Ukraine, just aid for Israel?
I don't want to get ahead of the president and his decision-making process, but we want that supplemental funding for Ukraine. They desperately need it. Time is not on their side. It's not on our side either.
All right, Admiral, always good to see you. And happy St. Patrick's Day.
You too,
Good
ma'am.
to see you.
You too.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.